Okay, so now we are ready to isolate the solid that is inside our recrystallization setup. The easiest way to get rid of the liquid is to pass this over a filtration funnel. And so that's what we're going to do, and we're going to make it even faster by applying suction just to make the liquid go through the funnel even faster. So to set up a vacuum filtration, first you need a filter flask with a side arm on it. So this is what we're going to hook up to the vacuum tap, which is this one right here with the red top. Please note the blue tops are natural gas. We want vacuum, not gas. And the tubing you need to use, we have two different types of tubing underneath the sinks for you. We have a thicker tube and then we have a thinner tube. You want to use the thick tube when you're applying vacuum. This thin tubing is just meant to flow small amounts of water through. It is so flexible that when you apply a vacuum to it, it has a tendency to just kind of close itself off and then you don't get vacuum. So pick the thicker hosing. But the hosing is so thick it tends to have a life of its own, and so you do not want to put this on the flask until you have clamped this to a ring stand. If you do not, then when you put this hose on here, it has a tendency, the hose will just make it flip over just like that. You don't want to lose your product. You do not want to break one of these flasks. So the first thing that you are going to do is hook up your flask to a ring stand. So I'm just going to do that really quickly. Okay, so now that's on there nice and secure. Now what I'm going to do is I can go ahead and put my vacuum hosing on here. And I can even connect it to the vacuum so I don't forget to do that later. Okay, so now I need the funnel that the solid is going to sit on, or the solid is going to collect on. So we have two different funnels. They are both Hirsch funnels. That's just what they're called from the scientist who designed them. They look exactly the same on the outside, however, they are different on the inside. So just like Buchner funnels, Hirsch funnels have holes punched through them. If you can see that, there's some holes way inside here and then up in here. And so this Hirsch funnel, it goes down a little bit deeper to reach that platform. This one, the platform is only about 1 centimeter from the top. This one, it's about an inch from the top. So they both, believe it or not, can hold a fair amount of solid. But the most important part for you to be aware of is the diameters of these plates are different. This one has a much smaller diameter than this one. And so you need to make sure that you're picking the right sized filter paper to fit inside it. We do have two different sizes available for you in the fume hood. This wider one is 3.2 centimeters. And this one is 1.5 centimeters. And basically you want to pick the filter disc that is going to sit flat inside the funnel and cover up all of the holes. So I am actually going to use the smaller one. And so when I take this out, I also always make sure that I've only got one. These filter paper discs are like any piece of paper. They tend to stick together. And if you have more than one filter paper inside your funnel, it slows down the filtration and it can even stop the filtration entirely. So all of your liquid and solid just stays in the funnel and the liquid doesn't ever pass through. So do make sure that you're only taking one and just putting any extras back. So you can go ahead and put that into your filter funnel. And so that's inside there now. If I just put it on top of the filter flask like this, it's not going to form a good seal between the glass and the porcelain because those are two rigid materials and they are not made to form fit each other. So to make sure that I form a good seal so that when I turn on the vacuum, all of the airflow comes from the top inside of the funnel. No air gets sucked through here where they meet. I'm going to use a filter back. This is just a rubber gasket basically. And so I'm going to put that in between the filter flask and my Hirsch funnel. And I do want to point out, this is directional. Basically, you want to, when you're looking at it from above, you want the words on here. One side of this says filter vac on it, and one side is completely blank. You want the words to be up. And when it's that way, you'll see that this conical portion here really nestles your funnel very well. So I will put that on there. And that is all you need for the actual filtration apparatus. Now to actually run the filtration, and I'm just going to change the camera around a little bit and then start doing the filtration itself. Now that you have your vacuum filtration apparatus set up, you are ready to go. So you are just going to open up the vacuum port, and first make sure that this is actually seated very well. It should not rotate when you try to. If you hear a lot of hissing, in fact, let me break it for a second. If you hear a lot of hissing continuously while your vacuum is on, that's a sign to you that this is not really forming a good seal. The other thing is, if you try to move it around and it wiggles really loosely, it rotates very well, that is another sign that this is not sealed well. So this is nice and tight. It doesn't want to rotate. So now I've got a good seal going. The other thing that I need to do is make sure that my filter paper that's sitting inside there is seated appropriately. There are going to be some gaps here, and if I started pouring my solid liquid mixture from my Erlenmeyer flask into here, then some of the solid could actually get underneath the filter paper. So you should have some of the solvent that you were using for the crystallization sitting on ice so that it's nice and cold. And you're just going to put a couple of drops of it onto your filter paper, and that is going to make it suck down and do what we call seating itself onto the surface of that filter funnel. Now what you're going to do is take your flask out, and let me zoom out a little bit here. Wrong way. Okay, so I've got my filter flask right here with the phthalic acid that I recrystallized. And I'm going to shake it up a little bit just to try and loosen some of that solid. And then I'm going to pour, but at first what I'm going to do is just decant off some of the liquid again, just to make sure that that filter paper is really seated. And I also don't want to have all of the solid go into the filter paper and clog the filter paper before I get the liquid to go through. And you can see that it is passing through down here. The liquid is going through, but the solid is not. And so now I've got most of the liquid down in there. Some of the solid has gone through, but not all of it. And I still have a really, really good amount of solid on there. It's pretty well stuck to the glass, and so what I'm going to do at this point is just take a spatula and I'm going to scrape it and try to get as much of it out using the scraping technique as possible. So then I will just scoop that and scrape it out onto the Hirsch funnel as well. Into the Hirsch funnel as well, I suppose I should say. So get as much of it as I can out. Something to remember now that I've got as much of it as I can out, this solid that's sitting on top of the funnel really is still quite wet with the water that I used. And remember, when I recrystallized this, I ended up with an impurity coming out of those crystals and being dissolved in the water. So right now, what's sitting on those crystals is not pure water. It is also some amount of that impurity sitting on top of those crystals. I want to get rid of that impurity so that I don't wind up with just more impure phthalic acid. The other thing is I want to try and get as much of the solid out of this Erlenmeyer flask as possible. so that I have as high of a percent recovery as I can. So what I'm gonna do is use more of that ice cold solvent. I actually got a test tube and I had it 3/4 full with water and put that on ice. It has to be cold for this step because if it's warm, it's going to dissolve some of the phthalic acid. So I want this to be ice cold. But what I'm going to do is just add a little bit of it to my flask. Not a lot. The more you add, the more dissolves. And I'm going to use that to not only wash those crystals from the Erlenmeyer flask into the funnel, but also to rinse the crystals as they are sitting on top of the Hirsch funnel. And you can do that. I would not do it more than twice to get it out of the Erlenmeyer flask, and maybe once more if you didn't think that you had appropriately washed your crystals on the funnel, then you could go ahead and add a little bit more. But just remember, the more of this that you do, the more of your phthalic acid is going to be dissolved. And you want to try to minimize the amount of phthalic acid that is being dissolved. That is going to destroy your percent recovery if you dissolve a lot of it. So after that, again, these are still wet. They still have water on top of them, especially since I just added more water. So you can leave it on the vacuum. It's just going to have air kind of passing through it for several minutes, and that is going to help dry off the crystals. The other thing that you can do is after you've had it sitting on here for a while, you can spread it out onto a hot plate, or onto a hot plate. Spread it out onto a watch glass, not a weighing boat. It needs to be glass. And then take that watch glass and put it on top of your beaker of water that was on your hot plate. Get it to a boil, and that will boil off whatever solvent is on sitting in mixed with your crystals. Once it is completely dry, you'll be ready to weigh it and take a melting point of it. In lab this week, you are not measuring the melting point of the phthalic acid, the practice one, but you are going to measure the melting point of your acetanilide that you are doing for the actual experiment. So after this video is over, what you're going to want to do is open the third video in this series, which is how to use our Digimelts. That is it for vacuum filtration. Just when you are ready, I do want to point out, and I'm going to rotate this setup a little bit. After you have allowed the vacuum to stay on the flask to dry the crystals out for several minutes, you're ready to turn off the vacuum and disconnect the hose. And I actually said that backwards. The first thing that you always want to do is disconnect the vacuum hose, then turn off the vacuum. This is especially important if you are using a oiled pump, or if you are using a water aspirator for your vacuum source, because both of those can actually send liquid back up the tube. So it's just a good habit to get in. Now, when you are disconnecting the hose, you are literally just going to pop it off of the side arm of the flask. Make sure that you're holding onto your beaker or your make sure that you are holding on to your funnel so that it doesn't pop off and send all of your solid down on the floor. So hold on to it and then just ease the hose off and turn off the vacuum. And then you can go ahead and lift off your Hirsch funnel, and if it's going to zoom in, focus, you can see all of those nice crystals on there.